What's the most significant you just FK'd with the wrong person moment you've witnessed or experienced? Stopped in Reno overnight while moving across the country. Had everything I own in a little beater I bought for the trip. All night I'm keeping an eye on the parking lot. There is a cop car in the lot. Sure enough, late that night I see a shady guy slowly walking along the line of parked cars, scoping them out. To my surprise, he decides the cop car is the one he wants to break into. So he takes off his shirt, wraps it around his arm, and starts hitting the window with his forearm. I call the front desk and let them know what's going on. Lady says she's calling the cops. I tell her it's a cop car and ask if there is a cop staying in the hotel. She says she'll check. About 30 seconds later, a very angry man in his boxers thunders out of his room and tackles the dude. He FK'd with the wrong person. There's this old miserly looking man with a nickel who seems to just ride the subway all day. The nickel man only seems to have one purpose in his life. He sticks his hand out with a nickel on his palm. And he just points it at you. It's like he's asking you to look at his plain old nickel. He's like a reverse panhandler. One night, I was coming home drunk and saw the nickel guy. He was doing his usual rounds. And he came to me. He stuck out his hand. And like usual, you just let him be. But I was tipsy and I pulled the nickel out of his hand. Within seconds, he went from normal nickel guy to F-king crazy rip your face off yelling angry gorilla man. Till I put it back. And he became normal nickel guy again. I was mortified. I live in front of a hospital parking lot. Some guy in an expensive car cut in line. A lady in a van was super pissed off and kept honking. He got out to calm her down. She got out, ripped off her wig and started screaming and pointing at the cancer center entrance. He looked like he wet himself and got back in his car. Still stayed where he cut in line though. A lady in a van was super pissed off and kept honking. Sounds like my sister. She got out, ripped off her wig and started screaming and pointing at the cancer center entrance. Never mind. Sounds like my aunt. My father and his brother, who are both 6'6", were riding in my uncle's tiny little Chevette and a guy road raged and chased them into a parking lot. You could almost see the guy fill his pants when they unfolded themselves out of the car. Do you find something comical about my appearance when I'm driving my automobile? Two drunk guys were bugging this local busker, trying to get him to fight them, saying all sorts of racist stuff. The busker was black. The busker just lost it. Obviously he had to deal with a ton of drunk assholes. He picked up his guitar and hit one of the drunk guys across the face with it. I called the police when I saw it, and later got called in to give evidence against the drunk guys, who got arrested, saying that they started it. Two kids, about 11 years old, were bullying this 9-year-old kid by instigating their little sister to go hit and kick him, with the threat that they would beat him with a hockey stick if he retaliated. The poor 9-year-old pleaded with them to stop, but when they wouldn't, he charged the kid with the hockey stick, took it from him, chased them off, threw the stick over the fence and continued to saunter home. I witnessed this from about 50 feet away at age 13. It took place in about a minute, and while I was contemplating a way to help the kid out, he just took matters into his own hands like a G. That little kid was not the one to FCK with. When I was about 10 or so, I shot a cricket with a Nerf gun from a prone position and it dodged it, then jumped at me, and I got up in panic so fast. The gun flung from my hand into the kitchen, breaking a few glasses. Never FK'd with crickets again. I was working in a sketchy part of Albuquerque when I realized a guy was following me through the parking lot. Started walking faster, so did he. I knew I wasn't going to get into my car before he reached me, so I took the knife out of my purse and turned around and shoved it in his face and yelled, "I'm from Wisconsin, I can gut idea." Dude took off and I got in my car shaking. Edit. Whoa. Thanks for the gold thrice over. For those asking, it was in the Four Hills. I worked at that movie theater that closed down. And I was 21 at the time and didn't know what else to do. So I pulled the one weapon I had and shouted the first thing that came to mind, and yes, I can gut a deer. No, I didn't stab him in the face, I pointed it in his face. Was that the smartest thing to do? No. But yeah, no. Instinct and stuff. I'm just glad it wasn't actually a gang member, or I'd most likely be dead. After drinking and partying in the honch outside our base in Japan, my friend and I went to the on-base taxi stand to go back to the barracks. We hail and start climbing into the first open cab we see. This drunken white guy was running for it, but we beat him to it. We didn't see him. Anyway, he's furious and starts yelling at us. 2 girls. 1 Latina. The other black. You stupid F-king. And then a group of about 6 black sailors come around the corner to the stand. I don't know how it happened. Maybe Paul Mooney summoned them. Anyway, white guy changes his mind and ends up running, to the ships. A fight didn't break out though. Edit. My first ever Reddit gold. Thank you. : I work at a restaurant and 4 punks decided to dine and ditch. They ran out and got away, but luckily I overheard one of their names while they were eating. Long story short, I tracked him down on Twitter and the direct messages went like this. Me. Haha. Nice try. We know who you are. You owe $40. Bring the money or we are reporting you to the police and your school. Insert HS name. You have until Sunday night. 1 minute later, punk. I'm terribly sorry for this horrible incident. Punk. I'm bringing the money right now, punk. I'm terribly sorry, it wasn't even my idea. I had no choice but to run also, or else I'm in trouble. Punk. We left a bag of money. 15 minutes after I sent the message, a guy literally opened the front door and threw a Ziploc bag full of $40 of cash and change into the restaurant and ran away. Idiots. Edit. In high school between classes, a couple of the defensive backs on our football team thought it would be funny to run full speed into the open doors to knock over the students that were leaving the classrooms. After seeing this happen a few days in a row, the football team's starting defensive tackle, decided to post up behind the door. After I felt the thump of my fellow teammate hit the door, I emerged from behind the door to find him laying on the ground. I reached out a hand and helped him to his feet. Then I told him, hey man, you gotta watch where you're going. There's a door there. I watched a guy try to steal a girl's purse. He ran past her, grabbed onto the strap, and tried to yank it off her arm. She was a lot stronger than he'd anticipated, because she pulled the bag back and sent him sprawling onto the sidewalk. She then kicked the shitty out of him, screaming at him the whole time. As this took place in Montreal, people just watched her beat him up and clapped politely when she was done. She curtsied to the crowd, spat on him, and walked off. Drunk high as FCK guy on the bus kept saying really rude things about this woman. Her husband right next to her. Short white guy gets in this guy's face. F-ked up guy gets up to hit the white dude. White dude socked him in the stomach and then punched him in the face. Drunk, he got knocked out and his mouth was super bloody. Someone call an ambulance. I was in a subway station in San Francisco, Church Street, and this was almost 20 years ago. There was a well-dressed older Asian man, probably in his 70s as I recall it. A particularly dirty panhandler was giving him a hard time on the platform, asking for money and being really aggressive about it. The nicely dressed older gentleman reached into his pocket, withdrew a handful of change and tossed it lightly into the air between himself and the street urchin. When the bum looked up at the money, the old man karate chopped him right in the throat and the dude went down hard. The bum didn't get up and the old man just calmly walked a few steps away and continued to wait for the train. That was one ice cold Mothefka. I had a bully named Bunny, her real name, in junior high. I have mild cerebral palsy and I just had surgery. So, here I am in the bus line on crutches in a cast up to my hip. She mouths off one too many times. I shove my crutches away from me. I go flying through the air with my leg jutting out like a bad wing. I slam into her, knocking us to the ground. Her eyes are huge. I get my face 2 inches from her face and say I could FCK you up bad. You are a piece of shit and I don't want to get my hands dirty. People helped me up. After that she would occasionally say something. If I stepped towards her she would jump. My little sister was in high school and this much bigger. Fat girl kept putting her dirty sandals on the back of my sister's chair. My sister politely told her to stop. She kept doing so. My sister knocked her feet off the back of the chair, but this girl kept putting her nasty sandals on the back of my sister's chair, even rubbing her sandal in my sister's hair. So my sister calmly walked over to her and beat her in the face until the teacher pulled her off. I had a guy that would sit behind me on the bus and flick my ears. I was in 4th grade, he was in 6th or 7th. I asked him to stop and I was even polite about it. Then I opened his face with my metal lunchbox. Telling a cop to chill out. It's just jaywalking. At a concert a dude pushed my friend out the way, so my friend pushed him back. Dude stopped going where he was going and turned around to push him again. My friend turns around and dude realizes my friend is a foot taller and built to play rugby. Some might try and back off at this point. He decides to toss his bottle at my friend's face. After bouncing off his forehead, my friend tackles him down a nearby hill, and by the time I've gotten to them, like 10 seconds later, wasn't dressed for hill climbing, my boy has pinned him down stomach first and punching the back of his head repeatedly. I pull him off and after a bit of him threatening to spend the rest of the evening chasing him down, I persuade him to calm down cause the doctors are scared of him and his head is bleeding. The dude scampered while that was happening and no one was reported dead the next evening, so yeah, I don't know who he was but he owes me. Joined the middle school football team. Kept getting rhinoed in the ass by the biggest kid in middle school. He was 6 feet. Easily 260 pounds. Wanted him to stop, so naturally I turn around to push him away. End up somehow magically hitting him in the face really hard. I have never ran faster in my life after that. Sorry Big Red. I didn't mean to hit you in the face. TLDR. I am a bitch boy that can run like Forrest. In 4th grade I switched schools. And on my first day of school I found the biggest kid I could and punched him in the face. He then proceeded to pick me up by my throat with one hand and pin me to the wall. Were you attempting to do what new prisoners do to prove they're not a pushover? When I was bouncing we were kicking 2 idiots out. Once outside they decided to double team one of the doormen, the cooler in fact. Then the father of one of these numpties decided to help since his son was being attacked. 3 punches thrown landed. 3 idiots unconscious. And the father wound up in a coma for a few days. Since our bar was smart, we had camera coverage everywhere and the police cleared it without hesitation. Super drunk kid couldn't get into a bar because it was at capacity, but he kept giving the bouncer shitty. He continues to get up in the bouncer's face and the enormous bouncer is saying something like, "I'd love for you to swing at me." Go ahead. Naturally, the drunk kid throws a wobbly punch and is subsequently picked up and pile driven into the ground. The bouncer then got a few kicks in for good measure. Legit could have killed the kid. That said, I doubt he will be getting in the face of a bouncer again. Provided he still has mobility in his extremities. My father is a bona fide badass. One evening, he was alone at one of his favorite restaurants. And a guy would not stop harassing the waitress. So he just stared at him. After a minute, the guy says, "What are you starting at?" My dad says, "An asshole." The guy jumped out of his seat to fight. And my knocked him out with one punch. Dragged him outside. And stuffed him in a trash can. The family that owned the restaurant were always happy to see him. And treated him like an honored guest whenever he ate there. Some guy I know who's the usual internet expert on everything was going on about how to deal with changes in pressure in an airplane. Another guy told him how to cope with it, recommending the Valsalva maneuver. Internet expert got all huffy and insisted that the guy was full of it. The guy said, "Oh, I dunno. That's what I learned during astronaut training." Turns out the guy really was a multi-mission NASA astronaut. Fortunately, Mr. Expert was very gracious about it and we all had a good laugh. I think they shared a couple of shots of single malt after that. I'm still proud about this. Although I probably shouldn't be. I worked as a bouncer in a club for a while. I don't really look the part. But I can both dish out and take physical punishment without much trouble. A male drunk customer was harassing a female customer. I don't know how it started. But she came to me and asked me to help her. So I told him to leave her alone. He mumbled something about me wanting to steal his target. Yes, he used that word. And apparently didn't realize that I worked in the club. Even though I had the bouncer ID pinned to my shirt. He tried to punch me. But was too drunk to hit me properly. So I grabbed him and literally carried him outside. Edit. It's late. I's bad with the grammars. One day my dad and I were setting up our boat for a quick sail and a guy comes up to us and starts bitching about how we drove in way too fast. Boat ramps bring out the absolute worst in people. I tell the guy and my dad to calm down and just leave it. He says, "Shut up, bitch. Leave this to the men." My father, who has the boat's 100 pounds mast in his hand, loses it and throws the mast at the guy and starts beating this dude. Never ever insult a man's daughter in front of him. Especially when he has 100 pounds metal stick in his hand. Chatted shit to this guy on the internet once. Turned out he's some sort of high-ranking sniper in the Navy SEALs. On a cruise with friends for vacation. Hit it off with this cute couple from the Midwest. The girl is a petite but fiery redhead. The guy is a 6FT2 ex-Marine. Both are super nice. We round a corner one day and a guy runs into ex-Marine husbando. He accidentally drops his drink. Cue the sounds of Mothfka. Watch where you're going. This wasn't free. You're gonna pay for it. Etc. Completely drunk asshole. Obviously oblivious that he is thrash talking the Hispanic equivalent of John Rambo. The wife decked him. Once. Then she snuck in behind him. Kicked him behind the knee and put him into a chokehold. Asked very nicely to apologize to her husband. Guy was almost crying at this point. And the husband said something to the effect of let him go. Live. He ain't worth the effort. Full stop. Turns out Wiffy is a cop and a Krav Maga instructor. Wife lets go. Drunkard scrambles up. Calls us crazy and leaves. He avoided us for the rest of the trip. After a car accident during a road trip. Kid driving the other car gets out, starts walking over all puffed up trying to look tough. When the other car we're traveling with pull up behind our truck. As unplanned. But perfect timing. All 6 of us full grown men get out and start walking up. You could literally see his balls shrink. In high school. I turned a teacher in for some pretty serious sexual harassment, statutory rape, molestation bullshit that I had witnessed and heard about between him and another girl. It took me weeks to gather all the evidence I needed to turn him in. Once I had finally done it, I knew shit was going to go down any day and I was having to pretend like everything was normal. Sometime between when I had turned in my evidence and his arrest. He was trying to flirt with me by telling me if there's anything you need. I told him I was onto him and he had messed with the wrong girl this time. There had been rumors the year before of his actions with a different girl and even before that at another school. Ugh. That was the last time I ever saw him. He was arrested in class the next day. FCK that guy. When I got to high school I was recruited to the freshman football team. At the time I was the biggest freshman around but nowhere near as big as the seniors. During daily doubles. In the hottest time of the year. I get told to go practice with the varsity team. There's this guy named Miller who's the star linebacker for the school. Like there's banners all over the school that say it's Miller time. Turns out this was something he said before he knocked you out. Cause I'm supposed to play offensive lineman against this guy who's like 220 and 6'4". So I'm totally freaked out. He lines up. Gives his it's Miller time. Frush, short for freshman, and then launches at me full force. Thing is, He didn't know I had been training in Aikido for 10 years and was the youngest black belt in the state. As useless as Aikido is for anyone but Steven Seagal. The next thing Miller knew, he was face down in the dirt and I casually walked over him. Coach laughed his ass off, then made Miller run laps till he passed out. I spent the rest of the year hiding from him.